Hey everyone, welcome to the extended cut for the Unscrambled Faith podcast and the series that we are currently soon wrapping up, Story Through My Eyes. I'm your host, Megan Clark, and thank you for clicking play. Interesting enough, full transparency, it is late at night. Just got out of the shower. I did say full transparency. I just got out of the shower. And even though I should be asleep, granted, I couldn't sleep. And I found myself scrolling through videos. And I found myself specifically looking for videos of just anyone, I guess, you know how you can type in, like, the keywords. So I was searching words like, divorce, season of divorce, divorce without kids, just divorce in general. Because, here's the thing. Not that it's a bad thing, because this is definitely a good thing, that I currently do not have any friends that are going through the same season of life, walking through this divorce season of life, or I don't know if I want to call it that, but I don't have anybody that I can relate to. And like I said, that is why I said that it is not a bad thing, because I would much rather not have anybody, to be honest with you, in my circle of my friends that are going through the same thing. I don't wish this on anybody, but it's very lonely. It's very lonely. In fact, I will say too that I have considered looking up online. It's like kind of, I just keep procrastinating, and I know I want to and I need to, but I want to look up like places in my area online that are kind of like support groups, groups of people getting together for, that are going through divorce, that kind of thing. And, once again, another full transparency moment, I will say that I am very intimidated with that because, I'm the one that decided that I'm getting divorced. Right? Like, I'm the one that's made the decision. I don't know, and I could be, I almost dropped my blue blockers, y'all. I could be wrong, but, and I probably am, let's be honest. But I feel like I'm just coming to the conclusion, or I'm making assumptions, really, that in my mind, I'm like, okay, if I find a support group, and I go to the support group, will there be anybody there that has chosen divorce that needs the support all the same? Or what I'm afraid of, what scares me, is like showing up to a support group and being judged because the vast majority did not decide to get divorced. Obviously, I won't know until I show up to one of these things. I know that. So that is for sure on my to-do list over the next couple of days. Also, reason being that we're nearing the almost last week of the month for December, and my therapist, her born day is around this time. In fact, it was not too long ago. Born day, I call it a born day. She calls it a born day, her birthday basically. But born day. So I guess hopefully that makes sense. Why she calls it that. But if not, it's I believe that it's because she didn't give birth to herself. Her mom did, so it's her born day. But yeah, and it's the end of the year, and like so many other people that need to do this, she takes some time off for herself, and good riddance, she deserves it. But there's somebody like myself that could really use a good therapy session, especially because, as y'all know, and I've talked about, I've started going to therapy bi-weekly to cut down on extra cost. So yeah, there's that. It feels like, honestly, that it's been an eternity since I've been to therapy. In actuality, it really hasn't, but mentally it feels that way. So yeah, so that's why I really want to look up in my area in the next couple of days. I'm like, I know I need to add it to my to-do list or something, because I'm just going to forget procrastinating more for longer than I already have. But I want to find a group. But anyways, I digress. So that kind of goes back to where I was rambling about that I was looking up videos, anything to do with divorce, because I'm like, okay, I'm grasping at straws, y'all, because I'm trying to find someone or videos or something that I can relate to, people that are like going through things that are similar to what I'm going through. And here's the hard part, is that a lot of the videos that I was even coming across, the majority of them I really couldn't relate to, because I'm in a very different, like, mentality wise, I'm in a very different place than a lot of the videos that I was seeing. Also, sadly, even though I was asking the, like, algorithm, I guess, to, like, provide videos where, like, kids were, like, not, like, no kids, basically, and then a lot of the videos I was coming across otherwise was talking about kids with divorce. Anyways, and so I got to a point where I was getting frustrated. I was like, you know what? I've been wanting to do this extended cut from episode 6, so hopefully you listen to episode 6, and if you did and you're listening to me now, it means that you're wanting a little bit more content. And you know, I was like, I was going to record this tomorrow. But also, here's the thing. When something is weighing heavy on you, whether it's a good or bad thing, I firmly believe in living in the moment. And this has been weighing heavy on me since I've recorded the last episode, which was last week. And I knew that I wanted to do this, and even though in my mind I was like, okay, I'm planning on doing it Monday or like Tuesday, and I don't want to plan on doing this specific part, because it's just not going to come across as like more as authentic. It's going to come across to me probably more likely like more organized, and I don't want to do that. So episode 6, I will say this, hopefully you listened to episode 6. If not, feel free to pause this and then go back to listen to episode 6. So what I really wanted to do, so during episode 6, there was so much content, so many questions, so much that I wanted to say, and I knew that if I included everything that I wanted to say, I was going to go well over like a long period of time. And even though some of my listeners have told me or commented or shared with me, you know, maybe perhaps like, I know one specific person had reached out to me. She's a good friend of mine, so shout out to her for supporting your girl. But she was like, you know, I travel, I'm on the road a lot. When I am on the road, she's going longer like distance, so it makes sense to her. She's like, I really enjoy when you do the longer episodes, when you're recording longer episodes, because that way she can listen to it like on her drive, and then it's all good. Also, I've heard from another person that I not that familiar with, but they found my podcast, so shout out to them as well. They said the opposite. They were like, you know, I like the shorter cut videos. I like, you know, and because I want to know like approximate time. So yeah. So anyways, that's what I was trying to do last episode. And I didn't want to go over time, and just also, I don't know if you've ever recorded yourself doing like video content. I love doing reels, but recording the podcast, especially considering the heaviness and the tone and the topic at hand. And, you know, let's be honest, episode 6 was really heavy. It took so much out of me mentally and like, well, really everything, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And it was just such a crazy, tiring, stressful week as it was. And I'm glad I cut it at where I did. However, like I said, there's a lot more that I wanted to like dive deeper and answer the questions that I had in front of me from last week in more depth, and then kind of go, I don't know if I want to say maybe like, dare I say, unhinged. But yeah, I don't want to be filtered per se. I just want to answer the questions like as raw and honest as I can. So thank y'all for hanging out with me. And like I said, I just got out of the shower. I was getting in bed, couldn't sleep, scrolled to no end, got bored of that, and was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to take my tired butt into the office and record this video as I'm doing now. And you know what? Here's the thing too. I feel like a lot of this is weighing heavier on me because this is the week of Christmas, and you know what's interesting is that in years past since being married, I would say the first couple years being married, I will say I did enjoy to an extent traditionally hanging out with my husband's family and celebrating Christmas with them and doing our traditions. Then like midway, so I would say that was probably for the first couple years, and then After that, I really found more peace and solace. About 2, 3 years ago, spending more time by myself. We would do like our traditional things for Christmas Eve, and then Christmas Day, I ended up just staying at my house, here in the house, and then hanging out and just treating it like any other day. And then, interesting enough, last year I just found that I wanted to switch it up and do things different, but I last year I remember I ended up actually meeting up with some of his family members one on one before Christmas Day and Christmas Eve, and I actually enjoyed that a lot more, like the one on one conversations. It felt more personable, it felt more intimate. It wasn't as stressful, it wasn't as overwhelming. I, particularly as I've gotten older, just don't really like really big crowds. I also, even when I feel like a big part of the crowds is, aside from like overstimulation, it's the bigger picture for me is the energy. So like, I'm a very empathetic person, and whenever there's a large group or large masses of people and I'm around all of that energy, it's not always good energy. And even though I do work really hard at protecting my energy, and making sure, if I know ahead of time that I'm going to be somewhere, that I set myself up, like mentally and spiritually, armored up, guarded up, to protect myself wherever I'm going. However, that's not always the case. So I have found over the years that I enjoyed staying at home, creating my own traditions. But you know what's interesting enough is this week leading up to Christmas, it feels different. It feels different. Um, I I still don't want to do any of the things that I used to do. I have not changed my mind on that. It is going to be a little bit different for me because my immediate family, they're going out of town, and I'm actually going to go stay over at my parents' house. And what I'm very excited about, I will say, is that I met a vendor this last weekend who does like pre-made meals, and I'm very excited about the fact that they put together, for this week they're going to do like a full-on Christmas meal that you can order like per person. Most restaurants, most places don't do that to where it's like a Christmas spread. And I'm so freaking excited about that. I just have to say that before we press into like the deeper questions. I'm very excited about that. And I normally don't get excited about that kind of stuff. Thanksgiving sometimes, Christmas, meh. It honestly just depends upon what it is. But yeah, but I'm very excited about that. You know, interesting too. I don't know if you can relate to this or not, but this month, this year for December has just been very different. Different in a way of, I purposely have been more intentional with the month, moving slower through the month, but also, in years past, I will say that usually would struggle around this time of year with my mental state, with feeling more sad, with feeling like more depressed, seasonal depression, having a hard time like being productive and moving around and doing the things. And what's interesting is I found that I almost have like kind of a balance this month of resting when need be, and then getting back up and doing the things, and then resting, and then just kind of that back and forthness. But December doesn't feel finalized to me. It normally does around this time. Like, mentally, I'm normally like, okay, it's the end of the year, and we're getting Christmas shopping done. And I will even say, interesting enough, I'm in my office, and I was super, super excited to put my Christmas tree up, y'all. Like, you don't even understand. Like, in fact, all of the ornaments for my Christmas tree are to the left-hand side of me right now. And I started decorating, I think it was 2 years ago. I started decorating an older tree that we had here in my office. And it brings so much happiness to me. I absolutely love it. Interesting enough, I just am not going to do it this year. I really wanted to. It does partially make me sad, but I just don't want to. And funny enough, I remember last year, I believe, in all seriousness, I want to say, I think it was like Christmas yeah, I want to say it was actually Christmas Eve that I decorated my, yeah, it was when I decorated my tree in my office last year. I remember I stayed up really late because I wanted to, not because I had to, because I wanted to, and I was watching movies back to back. I had like probably hot tea or cocoa go like sipping on that here in my office, having a good old time decorating my tree, and just freaking loved it. Yeah, I loved it. And even though I'm looking at my ornaments right now and I had good intention of wanting to decorate, my heart's just not in it. My heart's just not in it. And I don't know if it's a part of me is because I won't be living in this house after this end of this year. At least for, at least I'll be in the house at least for like, the divorce is final in February. So, but to me, it's like, it's getting like closer to that date. So I don't know. Right? I don't know. Maybe it's a part of that. Maybe because I have noticed, of course, I've talked about this before with this series, that over the last month or two, that there's been, places around the house that I have purged, things I've cleaned up, moved around. It's different. It's not like, it's obviously not spring cleaning because we're like in freaking December. And I normally don't really do that kind of stuff around this time of year, but also because I know that I'm not going to be living in this house for that much longer. And I know that if I take advantage of the time, that it's just going to be up like that, especially with this neurodivergent brain I've got going on. But, staying ahead, trying to find some like free and balance between feeling like I'm going crazy. So, let's think about like, so there's perimenopause, right? So, if you know, all the things that's chopped up with that. So the craziness of that, on top of just everyday mundane, like, because the world keeps spinning and life just keeps lifing, and, yeah, and we're just, enjoying life for what it is and taking it day to day. And then on top of that, there's a new season that I'm in, right? The divorce, the season of divorce. I don't know if I want to say it or not. It sounds like we're like celebrating it, but, life is very, life is going to be very different. Life is looking different right now. It's certainly feeling different. Yeah. So anyways, let's go ahead and dive in, right? So, extended cut, diving deeper. I figured that I will just go through the line of the questions that I was looking at this last week. And instead of it being a little bit more shorter, to the point, I figure I'll read it over, and then, yeah, I'll be as honest as I can with the questions, that was given to me. All right. So, when you think about the version of yourself that carried all of this quietly, for years, what do you feel toward her now? I feel sadness. I feel sadness. The fact that I have, the fact that I have carried a lot of this on the weight of my shoulders for so long, it's just really sad. It's really sad. It's very lonely. Because, there's a lot of things that I think about. I think about, I don't ever want to burden somebody. I don't ever want to feel like a burden. I have really close friends of mine that are truly going through some tough things, have been going through some tough things. I'm the kind of person, even before all of this took place, ever since I can remember, since I've been younger, I've always been the kind of person where I don't share a lot of like what's going on with me internally, because I just don't want to just dump that on somebody. I've never wanted to, like I said, just be a burden. It also has a lot to do with lack of trust with a lot of people that have been in my life. In fact, even now, there are a handful, if not a lot more than that, of individuals that don't even know that I filed for divorce. But I will say, though, with that I've been very purposeful with not shouting it from the rooftops, because this is such a serious thing, and I don't want to, I'm not taking it lightly. It's very personable, it's very heavy, and just like anything else, it's very influential. So what I mean by that is, like, think about, like, when you hear that someone that you know knew someone that passed away, right? And when you read it online or you hear about it, what does that do? It drudges something up inside of me. Like, when I read that someone I knew had somebody that passed away, they knew someone that passed away, a memory comes up, right? Like, either, oh man, it brings me back to a time that I lost somebody as well. Maybe I'm already feeling kind of sad. It makes me feel sadder. It just kind of touches on emotions going on with me. And I just don't want to be the person. I'm reading the room, right? Like, by reading the room, I'm not going to just drop this kind of information on anybody, let alone those that I'm coming across, unless it authentically, like, feels right. God puts it on my heart to share it with them. Because here's the thing, is that news travels fast. And whether it's now, whether it's a month from now, 2 months from now, the people are going to find out. Like, right? People are going to find out. Whether it's through somebody else, even if it's not me, they're going to find out. But for someone like myself to carry this for so long, a lot of times, I mean, I find it so hard to believe that a human being can be capable, not that it's something that we need to be doing, but just the fact that I've been carrying this for so long, and a part of me I scare myself sometimes, because for the longest time, and I think back in, like, I'm 37, so I think back on, like, my early 20s and, like, my teen years, there was a massive amount of time where I was masking, where I was chameleon my way through life, where shit could be hitting the roof, like the dumpster fire, like my life was a dumpster fire, like things were going crazy, out of control, I was out of control, or my life was out of control, like things could be so bad, okay? And or even, like, on the inside, like I could be truly struggling mentally, and I was a long time ago, for a very long time, struggling on the inside, but on the outside you could never tell. No one could ever tell. And I don't know, maybe some did and they just, whatever reason, didn't say it, but for the most part no one can tell, right? Because it's like, for one, social media, hello. But isn't that interesting how there's so many times with so many people in our lives that they're going through things that we otherwise would never ever know they were carrying and or going through. So yes, I feel sadness towards the version of myself that has had to carry this for so long. Because at the end of the day, no one deserves to have to carry or otherwise feel suppressed, that they have to be so quiet and keep all these things to themselves for fear of judgment, right? Or fear of not being understood. What did survival look like for you back then? Sorry, I had to get some water. What did survival look like for you back then? Not thriving, just surviving. Ooh, yeah, I gotta stretch my shoulders out for that one. That one made me. Ooh, y'all, these questions are. We're only on the second question. I'm already tensing up. So survival look like for me back then? Oh gosh. Survival looked like just trying to get out of bed. and struggling to do the bare minimum, from making sure that I take a shower, making sure that I'm brushing my teeth. Survival felt like not being sure if I wanted to be here anymore. Again, feeling isolated, lost, feeling like you're losing your mind. When you're in a relationship where you're constantly being gaslit, where you live with a narcissist, where you never feel seen, where you feel overlooked, belittled. It's interesting because where I feel like a lot of times that I'm going crazy is that on the outside of my house, on the outside of my marriage, I'm a very bright person. I'm a very open and honest and colorful, and I've been described as bubbly and outgoing and funny. But in my marriage, it was like I constantly felt like I had to dim my light. I felt like I was too much, that I was constantly taking a back seat, that I was skating on thin ice, that I was living with someone that I ultimately could not, for the life of me, for a long time, predict their behavior, especially before sobriety. Now I can predict his behavior. I can predict what he's going to say or do next. And I'm not even gonna lie, I don't even know what's like worse, like skating on thin ice, not really sure where you stand with somebody, or the other side where it's like now, where it's like very predictable. I know the ins and outs, the play by play. I don't really know what's worse. But that's survival. Survival is just taking it one day at a time. Most days were not so great. I look back on, gosh, let's see, this had to be at least 3 or 4 years ago, and there was a solid year or two where I really struggled. I really struggled with, overall hygiene. I struggled with my weight, not loving myself. And again, on the outside, because I, for the life of me, was just trying so freaking hard to stay above water and not drown. And there were people in my life, my business kept me afloat. My good friends kept me afloat. My faith, my relationship with God kept me afloat. But you guys, when I say keep afloat, I mean water up to my freaking chin. Like, just barely keeping my head above water. And this last year or two has been a huge turnaround for me, in a way of, now that I've made this decision for myself, and I know that, like, there are better days ahead, there are brighter days ahead. I do not take advantage of just being able to just breathe again. Being able to take a full breath of air. Yeah. So that's what survival looked like for me. And I will say this to you, if you're in a place in your life, or I'm just going to speak to you. Like, if you're at a place in your life where you're like, you know what, I am there, or I've been there, you're not alone. You're not alone. And thankfully, there are more days than not that I am now more productive. I don't want to stay in bed as long as I used to. I mean, I remember there was such a long period of time when I would wear, I remember I had like this sleep mask on, and because I worked from home, this definitely made it a lot easier. But I just remember sleeping in and not wanting to like get out of bed, not wanting to wake up, not wanting to, I just didn't want to get out of bed. And there were some days where it was so difficult, like I was struggling so much that thankfully, thank goodness, at least I was able to like get to the kitchen, grab something to eat, get back in bed, or go to the bathroom, get back in bed. I remember I got to a point where I started I started keeping like little snacks or like a beverage or some water or something like beside my bed. And then I also would have like these body towelettes that you could just kind of wipe yourself down, because there were definitely a lot of days or nights when I was just struggling, and I wanted to feel good. I wanted to smell good. I wanted to feel good. I wanted to take care of myself, but I was just so emotionally and physically spent that just the very thought of getting my ass into the shower, like getting my body into the shower to clean up, to rinse off, I just didn't have it in me. I just didn't have it in me. Like I would have much rather just stayed in bed and just function the best way that I could. Fake it till I make it, right? Because that's what I was doing for so long, that it would go where it would be like a couple days before I would even take a shower. And I wouldn't even realize it, y'all. I wouldn't even realize it because the brain fog was real. I I was just struggling so much because I wasn't really getting much help around the house. I didn't feel supported in my business. I was just trying so hard just to figure out like myself. And I was just so disconnected in my marriage that I just felt like a freaking zombie. Like if I was out and about of the bed, I was walking around. I was so checked out, so disconnected from my emotions. It was surreal. Whew. What were you protecting by staying quiet for so long? Oh my gosh. So protecting, gosh, okay. Like, where do I start with that? I felt like I was protecting a lot. I wouldn't say not necessarily myself. I feel like I was protecting, first and foremost, some of my friends. There was only one really good friend of mine, my best friend, who truly knew to the depths from like the beginning till now of what I was going through. And God bless her for that. She was my sounding board, y'all. She is a saint. Because how does someone bring this up? Like I knew that at the time, if I was to open up and share what was going on with me with any of my other friends, during that time of my life, I was so sad and I was just so bitter and angry that I knew that there was a big part of me that, for one, would have thrown my husband under the bus and just badmouth him to no end. And what good is that gonna do? Yeah, it's gonna make me feel good for like seconds, but then after that, I'm just gonna be right back to where I was before. That's not gonna change anything. And my thing is too is that I never really knew like how to bring these things up. I was very concerned for a long time of what would people say? Where do I even start, right? Like, this is the whole point, right, of doing this freaking series. I mean, we're going on episode 6 now. Can you imagine everything that I've wrapped up into 6 episodes so far? Talking about all that shit to like one person? talking all that crap to like one person and just unloading on them all that. No, I can't either. And so that's why I kept a lot of it to myself. Now, thankfully, my best friend, she and I, even though we don't get to spend a lot of time together as much these days in person, we still keep in touch via text or through our group chat. Every now and then we would hang out like in the car or hardly, maybe not necessarily like doing something, but showing up to her house, talking outside, showing up to my house, hanging out late at night, eating maybe some snacks, hanging out, chilling, nothing over the top. Late nights, can't sleep, come over to the house, let's talk. But other than that, there was just so much that I did want to share at certain times, but it just didn't feel appropriate. Like, it just didn't feel like the right time. And once again, I just don't, there's so many times where I would much rather make the time that I have with my friends about them and less about me, if that makes sense. Also, I knew that I never once felt comfortable talking to any of my church friends about what was going on in my marriage. And this goes all the way back to like year 2 of being married, and this for when we were talking about wanting to conceive, trying to have a baby. I remember back then we were going to a new church and we were in a life group. And from now up until about 2 years ago, we have been either at a new church and or in a life group, okay? And throughout each of those churches, specifically with the life groups of those churches, interesting enough, my husband and I have been through very pivotal points in our marriage along the way where I have been in a life group, and never once did I, and unfortunately, maybe this is on me, but never once did I feel really comfortable with talking about everything that was going on in my marriage. So I remember for example, like the first life group, I somewhat mentioned that we were struggling with fertility. It was really difficult to talk about it in that group specifically. Funny, not funny, because the vast majority of those in that first life group that I remember being in already had babies. They already had babies. Some of them had their second baby on the way. There was a group of like 10 of us, I believe, and out of the 10 women, there was one other person other than myself that didn't have any children. And she was, I think, was she married? I want to say, yeah, I think she was engaged. But no babies. And, but it was just her and I, solo. And, but yeah, I mean, hopefully you can understand that. Like, I don't know, maybe not understand it, but with all of those girls being pregnant, newly pregnant with their second one, how does one even bring that up? Now, I will say there was one specific girl in the group that I knew that had both babies IVF. And so I was like, okay, that could be someone that I could possibly relate to. But we just never got to that point. And then fast forward to like the second life group, because I believe we've been in 3. So I've been in 4, but we've been in as a couple 3. The second one, let me think. Oh, Derek was, okay, we'll just pretend like I shouldn't say his name. My husband was he, let me think, was it the beginning? No, he had not gotten sober yet. So this was something we had talked about, but I don't believe that he was yet on his sobriety journey. Or maybe he was, to be honest, I can't remember. Maybe it was just the beginning of it. But that was something, once again, fear of judgment, especially being in an environment where faith was involved with our church friends. We were just getting to know them. And also that wasn't my story to tell, like that specific part about him, in such a, big group of people. I honestly, now I could have very well like shared, I guess, like about where I was at and my feelings about all that and how it was affecting me, but once again, it just never felt like it was is there a right time? But it just never felt like an appropriate time. And it just didn't feel right. And then, of course, flash forward then to the most recent life group that we were in about a year or two back. I think it was about 2 years ago. And that life group was incredible. We were with them for about 2 years, I want to say. I really enjoyed that life group. But yeah, and then that was pretty much going through the course of time where our marriage was not doing so great, despite all the other things. But once again, I don't know, it never authentically felt right. And also I find that there are times when I do bring up certain things about myself, whether it's having to do with my marriage or myself in general. A lot of times, like, people have follow-up questions, not everyone, but I think that's where I get in my headspace a lot, is that they're not gonna, like, just let it be and then be like, okay, prayers, let's offer prayers up and then move on. Then it's like, no, we're gonna need a little bit more context, or we're gonna need a little bit more info about this. And I think that's where the anxiety, like, I feel just more anxious about it, really, is that somebody's gonna want to, like, talk about it more than I really want to talk about it. But yeah, also I was, at the time, for quite a while, very protective over my husband in general. Just like with his sobriety, I kept that before he got sober. I kept his alcoholism from a lot of my friends, the vast majority of them, honestly, my family members, for quite a while as well. And it was not only because of the shame, but also because they really held him high, to, like, on a high pedestal. And I did not want to put him at the time in a position to where anybody was going to otherwise think ill of him. And pretty much the same with the struggles in my marriage. Same thing, I didn't want to, again, like, speak ill of him, throw him under the bus. Like, I'm the kind of person where it's important for anyone to make up their own mind about how they feel about somebody. Just like if someone comes to me, like, I've had friends before who will be like, you know what, I want to hang out with that person. Here's the thing. I will make that judgment for myself. I respect how my friend feels, and I'll also respect that they're looking out for me, but I'll also will tell them that I just need to come to that conclusion on my own. And I appreciate their input, but I need to figure this out on my own. And that's kind of how I felt about, like, with my marriage, is that there's my side of things, but even though the way I feel is the way I feel, anyone else that's outside of, like, myself, I was like, you know what? I'd rather just, like, let it be on how they perceive him. Because I knew that the moment that I open, like, Pandora's box and I share, okay, well, this is what's really been going on, or this is how it really is, or, yeah, you know what I'm saying? I knew that that would alter and change the way that a lot of people would otherwise view our marriage, let alone him. So that's why I held back for the most part of not letting people in on a lot of, like, what was going on. Also, I have been over the years very considerate. I think I said this earlier, very considerate of what my friends are going through. There are friends of mine who maybe are just trying to find themselves in their own marriage. Or maybe they're just going through a hard season of their life. And I know, from experience, like, whenever I first got engaged and through the course of planning my wedding, planning everything out leading up to the wedding day, I had a couple of two really close, good friends of mine that at the time, were going through a divorce. I know, ironic, right? So here we are, full circle moment. Yeah, anyways. Gosh, what was I going to say with that? I just had a brain fart. Where was I leaning with that? Where was I leaning with that? Oh, so I am very careful about who I talk to, because what do I want to just kind of throw in how I'm feeling or like where my headspace is at. Like, I don't want that to influence anybody. I really want people in my life to just kind of be like, I respect like what they're going through, and I'm going to keep a lot of the things about what I think and what I'm doing like to myself. Because the ones that I know that are going through things or had been going through things, I just didn't want to make it like worse for them, or I don't know. That's all I can say. So moving on, we're going to keep on trucking. Let's see. At what point did carrying it all alone start to cost you more than speaking up? Ooh, so like for me, I think about the fact that I was carrying this for so long that it started to ultimately take a toll on not only for a long time my mental health, but just my like overall like spiritual self and physically as well. Like, I just remember there were so many times where I was getting like really bad headaches, that my body was always feeling like, even to this day, like y'all see me a lot of times if you're watching the video, like I'm always rolling my shoulders back because I have so much tension in my neck, so much tension in my shoulders. But a lot of this was just ultimately like not metaphorically, but for sure physically weighing heavy on me. This is also, again, like why I wanted to record this, because I wanted to like get it off my mind, off my shoulders. And I tell y'all what, going through this series has been so healing for me, to be able to speak, to give my past self a voice is incredible. I mean, to say the very least, considering the fact that, several years ago, there was a time when I was keeping all of this to myself, right? And I didn't have a voice for it. And so it has been very healing. And I want to thank you, and I appreciate you for listening to me and letting me, have this space where I otherwise, can not only take you as a listener on the journey with me, but for me just to feel like I'm safe enough to be vulnerable and then share this, with you guys. But it just felt like, yeah, I'll just leave it there. That it was, that it was physically, it was just taking too much of a toll on me, and like enough was enough. So let's skip ahead a little bit. Let's see. Was there a moment, big or small, when you realize something had changed in you? Oh, for sure. So, we'll say, I don't really know if it lands on big or small. But I did notice that there was definitely a change within me when I think back on, it was about like maybe a year ago, for one, where I got to a place where I was not willing to give any kind of explanation for the choices that I was making. That's when, for one, I say that was a big change. A big change was when I found my voice, when it's non-negotiable, like the way I feel and the things that if I'm speaking it out loud into existence, to just know that I have thought about it for some time, that at this point I am sure of myself. And that's where I was like, ooh, like, this was about 2 years back, that I was like, ooh, wait a minute. Was that me? Did I say that? Because normally I would make a decision in the past and then follow up with a explanation as to why I'm making that decision. Or I would backpedal and then be like, oh, if that's not something you're happy about or something you want to do, and I would give an alternative. But now, no more. No more. I would say a small change when I knew something was happening, something was changing for sure. A small change that I noticed was that whenever my husband and I, when there would come a time when in the past I would normally get really pissed off about something, and I would want to voice it to no end, and I'd go from like 0 to 10 in anger, and then I would be very passionate about how I felt, and either like yell, or I would get mad, or just some kind of like strong emotion would come out. I noticed a small, I guess it was for sure a small change, but a big impact was that when I no longer wanted to do that anymore. I would say about a year ago, there was a large period of time where I felt numb. I went from, so years back, it was like, huge emotions, huge feelings, right? So like getting pissed off, getting angry, getting upset, getting sad, and just either like aggressively just throwing those emotions at him, however that looked like, and or sitting down and then getting so mad and so pissed off that it's like, okay, we're going to sit down, we're going to hash this out, we're going to talk it out. But then there was a year or two ago where there came a time when there would be something that he would do or say that in the past would normally make me really upset or make me mad. And then I noticed that I went through a time where it went from all that to feeling numb. I didn't feel anything. In fact, I remember there was a very specific time when I was sitting on the couch with my best friend. She and I were talking about some things that were going on between her marriage and then my marriage, and I remember there was something that she asked me about and that we were talking about within my own marriage. And she got really emotional about it. She got really sad. She got really emotional. She started to cry. And I was not crying. I was not crying. And I immediately recognized that. And I told her that. I said, wow, this feels very strange to talk about something that once made me extremely upset. But now, I don't feel anything. I've almost got to the point, when you're so distraught and you're so heartbroken over something that you've cried your hardest that you've ever cried in your entire life. And you've cried so much that your gut, your stomach is hurting from crying so hard. And then you get to a point where your eyes are swollen and tired and red and itchy because you've cried so much. You feel like that there's at that point, like no water left because you've cried so hard. And you just have nothing else to give. That's the next point, like where it was like, I felt like that. And then a year ago, I realized in those same situations that I felt peace. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel resentment. I wasn't upset. I wasn't even numb anymore. I just felt this sense of calmness and peace that I didn't have any, I didn't have any words left. I didn't have anything to say. I didn't want to argue anymore. I was all talked out, basically. I remember telling my husband that right about the time that I was telling him that I was filing for divorce, that I was all talked out, that I was calm again. I was at peace, but I just didn't have anything else to say. And I have felt all the things and back. How did loneliness show up in your day-to-day life, even when you weren't technically alone? Gosh, guys. Feeling alone when you're not alone has got to be the most gut-wrenching experience that somebody could ultimately be in. I don't wish it upon anybody. In fact, I've gotten to a place in my life where I enjoy my own company. I love being at home when it's just me. Well, let's be honest, me and my cats and my dog. But I enjoy being by myself. I enjoy my own company. However, what I don't enjoy is sharing space with somebody that is in the same space that I'm in, but we're not interacting. So what does that look like to share space with somebody and feel alone, but you're not actually alone? So what that would look like for me is, I'll paint a picture, for example. So my husband and I, there's been many times where, I'll be in like the recliner or on the couch, and then he's on the other couch, and we've been home for a while. It could be that maybe one or both of us was working earlier in the day, but then at some point, we made our way to like the living room, we're hanging out on the couch. And there would be times where I would have something that I wanted to share. It could be something that I had just tried for the first time. You name it, like tried a meal for the first time or had a conversation with somebody. Just trying to overall, like, without going into like details, there's just so many moments upon so many moments that I generally was attempting so many times to have a conversation with him, to connect with him, because we led very two different lives in our workspace. And I knew because of that it was important for him and I to connect in whatever way we could connect. And here's the thing is that when you love somebody, when you're not only that, but then when you're really close friends with your spouse, your significant other, you want to share things that are going on with you in your life, right? You want to share the excitement. You want to share in the excitement of like what's to come, or maybe an achievement or something that you tried or something that happened that day. And I just remember there's so many moments where I would want to, or I not want to, but I would go to him and I would share these things with him. I would want to have a conversation. And typically, let's just pretend I have my phone in my hand, because to be honest, like, I'm recording on my phone right now. But, my husband would have his phone in his hand. Definitely well, that was going to sound weird, but basically, like, my enemy is his phone, because he would have his phone in his hand. And, like, most of the time when I would start talking to him, he wouldn't even have his phone in his hand. And I would start talking with him. And I'm real big on eye contact. When I'm having a conversation with somebody, I don't like to make eye contact with somebody, but I try really hard to do so, because to me it's like a sign of respect. But also, well, not that this really matters, but I have a hard time, I have an audio issue. So whenever someone is speaking to me, I have to look directly at their face for the vast majority of the time that we're having a conversation. So that way I can actually like read their lips and hone in on what they're saying and make sure that I'm paying attention and not getting distracted by all the other things that are around me, right? So whenever I would start sharing with him maybe some exciting news that I had, or again, something, because I worked from home, so it was maybe something that I did for the first time that I accomplished, whatever the case may be. There was something, whatever I wanted to talk about or share. I would get a lot of, cool, oh yeah, oh, and I would look over at him, whether I was already on the couch, on the other side of the couch with him, or across the room, and I would not have his attention. I wouldn't have his attention. And that to me is the most loneliest of situations. For someone to not give me their undivided attention. I'm not asking a lot. And what's even more sad is that whenever I started working from home, because I didn't start working from home at the very beginning of our marriage, it was about 2 years in. And when I did start working from home, I noticed that for myself, where I really struggled with my ADHD brain, is that I wasn't getting a lot of like adult interaction. So I would get so overly excited about having a conversation with somebody, let alone wanting to share like some of the really cool things that I did that day. And he would walk through the home, he would come home from work, walk through the door. And I had this bad habit. Well, I don't really know if I want to word it like that, but I would just have this thing where I would just information overload, like word vomit. I would just talk and talk and talk and talk. For the vast majority of the time, like I soon realized later on, like months, year later, whatever, that it was more or less like a rant, and it was just me getting it off of my chest. And I remember there were times, to be fair, when I did tell him, I said, hey, if I am going on and on and on and on, like the Duracell batteries, and I'm not catching a breath, I don't need you to chime in. I don't need your opinion unless I ask your opinion. I'm more than likely just needing to get this off of my brain, like just getting it out into the universe. And I remember there were times where I actually did give him permission. I said, just let me rant. I'm like, mentally, like, he could check out during those times, but I'm like, I just need to rant, get it off of my chest, off my brain. Like, as soon as I say it, I'm probably going to forget at some point, like, what I've been saying. I'm like, but just let me get it out of let me just get it off my chest. And, but, otherwise, I remember I got to a point where I talked about this in therapy where I was like, you know what? Okay. Let me see. So let me think about this. Like he works really hard and he works like 12, 14-hour shifts. So, you know what? I'm going to make sure that whenever he comes home that I'm going to not allow, I don't want to say this. Like, okay, that was a horrible word to say. I shouldn't say that. I wanted to provide, there we go, provide him the space to know, okay, he's going to need time to check out, decompress. So for quite a while, we actually had this kind of unspoken truth between us where it was like, okay, whoever's coming home whoever comes home while the other person has been at the house, like whether it's him, whether it's myself, giving each other that time to go back to another room, like, go through the front door, go back to another room, spends X amount of time to decompress, whatever that looked like for us, but then know that, like, there's like a cap point where it's like, okay, I'm going to come out of the room and then I'm going to go check in with my spouse. And we had a good thing going for a little while. But it's a slippery slope. And I would say that there were more times than not that I just didn't have anybody like I just wish that there were times I just wish that I would have him. I wish that he would see me, to be in a relationship, let alone in the same household with somebody and not feel seen and not feel heard. And to have more times than not over the years where I'm just kind of keeping things to myself. And because what I've realized, sadly enough, is that he, for whatever reason, was not holding space for me to feel comfortable enough, safe enough to open my heart up, for me to, feel comfortable enough to, and I longed so much for deep, meaningful conversation. This like tit-tat seesaw where it's like, you share a little bit about yourself or like how your day's going, maybe whatever you want to talk about and share. And it's like this little like tango, right? Little seesaw where it's like you go and then I go and then you go and I go. And then it creates this like deeper level of conversation instead of having just one person talk at the other person. Now, like I said, there were times where if I could catch it ahead of time, if it was going to be like an ADHD type rant, if I could catch it ahead of time, then I would almost tell him, which I'm like, I don't know why, but I would tell him and be like, hey, welcome home. By the way, I gotta get this out of my system. And then it's just like over time, I guess it just became like my thing to where he would recognize it ahead of time, because let's be honest, if it's that kind of like spicy brain, like rant, I'm not really catching a breath in between. So at that point, he could really tell, okay, this is something that she wants to share that I'm taking breaths in the middle of, I'm taking breaks. It's very short to the point, versus other times it was like not taking any breaths and then just go. But yeah. Let's see. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here, because some of these questions were actually a little repetitive. Let's see. How did your faith evolve during this season? Not the faith you were taught, but the faith you lived. Ooh. Um, hmm. Faith for me has definitely been something that has stayed consistent from day one of getting married. My faith has stayed consistently with me. Faith for me is to know that God will always have my best interest at heart. My faith at the end of the day was, for a very long time, the only thing that I could trust, the only thing that I knew that was strong, that could not be shaken, that it was, if it's like the one thing I felt like that I had in my power, that ultimately I had power over my faith. Like I could determine how much faith I wanted to have. Like I could make the choice of keeping the faith, being faithful, holding on to the faith, going through seasons of my marriage or in my life in the last couple of years or so that there have been so many things that otherwise were out of my control that I couldn't otherwise predict, to know that I do have control over my faith. I have control of, you know, continuously chasing it, believing in it. So different from like the way I was raised, especially for me because, you know, walking by faith, not by sight, not knowing like what lies ahead, not knowing what comes tomorrow, but to know that I have enough faith within me, even when it feels very bleak, even when there's been seasons of my life that I have been struggling more than not. Faith has always stayed with me. It's the teeniest little bit of light that has stayed with me along the way. You ever wrestle with guilt for wanting more peace, clarity, or honesty? Um, I don't necessarily would say that I wrestle with guilt. I would say it's more like regret. I would have liked to have been more honest than I was in my marriage over the years. I wish that, looking back on it, I wish that there was a lot of more opportunities that I should have been more open and honest about what was truly like what I was really truly feeling, what was really going on. Because, you know, I've talked about this a little bit before through this series where there were times, in fact, interesting enough, I'm actually in this little season of my marriage right now where things are getting better, where they're not where I want it to be, but I can see like where he's showing up, where there's things that he's doing for me, um, sharing responsibilities. But here's the thing, uh, this is uh, this is nothing new to me. You know, I talked, I think it was I think it was maybe 2 episodes ago or so, where I talked about where the vast majority of my marriage has felt like I am in a dryer. Yeah. Well, that's what's happening right now. And uh, I just peace, yeah, I mean, I wish that I had a lot more peace from the very beginning, with myself. There was a lot more disruption, chaos, I would say for sure in the beginning. Peace ultimately for myself and my life had not come into play until maybe about a year or two ago. I don't know if that took all the things that I have gone through, maybe all the work that I've done for myself. It could possibly be that I have felt everything else but peace. uh, I could for sure say with that, like so easily say that there has never once been a point in my life since I was younger that I have felt the peace that I feel now, that I do feel like I felt at any point like the confidence that I have within myself now. I ultimately, I mean, I truly feel like I'm a whole different version. I'm a whole different person. I'm a newer version of myself. I'm a lot more grounded, again, a lot more peaceful. I'm very self assured as well. Again, just, standing firm in not only the decisions that I'm making, but where I want to be, where I want to go, you name it. Just being very sure of myself. Clarity. You know, I will say. How do I want to word this? I will say that there's a deep down, there's a part of me that thinks that my husband has not been fully honest with himself, let alone with me. I've encouraged him over the years to talk to a therapist, to be honest with himself, to get down to the root of, whatever's going on in that brain of his. And for whatever reason, he's never felt comfortable enough opening up to me over the years. Who knows what that could be. We could say upbringing. We could say, I don't know, maybe he just didn't trust me enough. Maybe he didn't feel comfortable enough around me. Maybe he just know how to articulate the words. A lot of that's honestly generational. Yeah. I don't know. I will say Instagram is a very interesting thing. If you are not familiar with how this works now on Instagram, there's a feature where you can see videos that your friends, people you follow, basically you can see videos of like what they've like reshared or what they've hearted, what they've liked. And interesting enough, even though I don't really check out that feature as often anymore, and what I'm about to say is like specifically for this reason, every now and then you'll scroll through your algorithm on Instagram, and as you're scrolling along, it'll come up with a video, and sometimes like in the corner, like down here, it's going to show you like someone you know that's either hearted the video or reshared it, right? Every now and then. Lately, who knows why, but lately the algorithm has been wanting to share with me some of the videos that my spouse has reshared or liked, mostly reshared. And I'll say frankly, it's annoying. In fact, this actually took the fun away from checking that little part at the top, because I like to see what my friends are liking. It lets me in a little bit more, helps me get to know them a little bit more, the people that I follow. But I specifically do not care to see the videos that my husband is reposting, because for one, that's his business. Just like the videos that I share, to each their own, but every now and then in the algorithm lately, it's been showing me videos that he has reshared. And let me tell y'all, it is I don't even know how to describe it. It's gut-wrenching. And I say gut-wrenching because he, and in a way it's like, I get it. But then on the other hand, I'm like, really? Because the part of me that gets it is because I've had social media for a long time. That sounds so stupid. I've had Instagram for a very long time. And there are albums that I've saved specifically on Instagram, that I've come across, like videos that I've come across that I can relate to for one point or another. One reason or another. And I've saved it into like these themed albums, right? One of them says, I think relatable, literally. And so, there are times where I'll either share it with a friend or I'll save it for whatever reason. And it's because I can relate to it, like, especially now, like, full circle moment. Hello. I was just talking about, I was on Instagram. Remember how I started this podcast off? I was on Instagram and I was searching for videos of people who are going through divorce. So I was looking for relatable videos, relatable content. And you know what? That's the part of me that gets it. Because, there are things that, of course he's human, right? So like he's feeling things, he's going through the stages of divorce, very much like the stages of grief, or like sobriety. And, he's kind of in the middle of it. So there are videos that, I see where on one hand, I'm like, you know what? That there's truth, there's real life. Like, this is how he feels, this. But I will say, on the other hand, there are videos that I unfortunately have come across on my algorithm that I will see that he has shared. I'm like, anyways, that's a whole nother soapbox. I'm like, why is the algorithm even showing me this crap? But I'll see a video that he shared, and that's where it gets very gut-wrenching. It's very frustrating, because basically, like, the way the video is set up is that whatever it says, like, on the video is like a deeper, like, layer of like how he's feeling, or not he's feeling, I should say, but in the video it's like how the person is feeling or what they're going through, a quote, or it's just something deeper. And it's just like, it freaking sucks, because it's like, what the hell? Like, this is the stuff that, where was this a couple years ago? Where was this last year? Really wanting to, for years and years, want to have this connection with your significant other, wanting to have these deeper conversations, these moments of, not only connection, but intimacy, and digging deeper, and sharing, what's going on in our hearts, what's going on in our minds. And I will say, that's on the other hand where I'm like, okay, I can't get too mad at it, because, it's relatable, right? Like, when we come across a video in our algorithm and we share it or we heart it, it's because we like it or it's relatable and we want to get it out there, right? We want to share with others for whatever reason. So a part of me, it's like, okay, I get it, because I've been there, done that. I do the same thing. But at the same time, I'm like, make it make sense. Make it make sense. Yeah. Maybe some things we're not meant to understand. Alright, let's skip a little ahead here. Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, so what truth was hardest for you to admit, even just to yourself? One of the hardest things by far for me to admit was that I was filing for divorce. This was something that, I don't know if I've shared this with y'all or not, but this is something that I had thought about well over a year ago. I was pretty much in the same boat as I am now within my marriage, prior to wanting to file for divorce. Last year, it was really just a thought. But the truth was, it was extremely hard for me to not necessarily admit, but to say it out loud. I spent the better half of this past year working through the stereotypes, the stigmas, the assumptions, the hang-ups, you name it, from what I was expecting, kind of like the backlash, or like what it was going to feel like, to know that I'm adding into, like, contributing to the number of divorces, specifically like within my family. And, that was something that I really, really, really had to work through in therapy, was not only saying the words out loud that I'm filing for divorce, but also the fact that I was just so, last year, I remember I was just so much in my headspace of, full of regret. I knew it was the right thing that I needed to do for myself, but just the thought of, like, okay, I have all these other family members that have been divorced. I swore up and down that I would never be the one to get divorced. I will say, and I'll say it again, of course, no one wakes up or no one gets married and they're like, well, I can always get divorced. Or, I never, ever once, ever thought once that I would get divorced. And I don't know if it was just, it wasn't really something I was like, I'm never going to get divorced. Never, never. I'm going to work through it. It was never, that was never the case. It was really just, it was really just not, it was just when something ever crossed my mind. And whenever I did put it on the table last year, that was really, that was hard to navigate and work through. Was just that, knowing that both sides of my family, there's a lot of divorce, that I have a lot of friends that had been or were going through divorces. And, I just never ever once thought that I would be put like into that like kind of category, So speaking out loud was by far one of the hardest things, one of my hardest truths that I had to work through. What did choosing yourself begin to look like before it became an actual decision? Ooh. Before it became a decision, choosing myself. That really meant for me, that's a tough one. So choosing myself meant holding on to things that, even if they seem so small, that brought me joy, that brought me happiness. If I felt like it, or if I could, documenting it, whether that was taking a picture, posting online, whether it was writing it down. Like I have a journal that, in fact, it's really cute. It's like this miniature travel size journal that's like sits. It could be like pretty much in the palm of my hand. And it is in my nightstand, right beside my bed. And it's not something that I consistently do every night. I mean, that would be a dream, right? But whenever it compels me to do so, no matter what the time span is, I'll pull that, notebook out from my drawer. It's like my little yellow book, not my little black book. And I'll flip to a new page, and then I'll jot down one good thing that happened that day to me. And I like writing the date at the top too, in case I ever want to look back on it. Things like that. Choosing myself, choosing my happiness. Not necessarily daily, because for someone like myself, that really felt heavy to choose myself daily, especially considering the fact that I did have a lot of, I still do, have a lot of responsibilities. I wear a lot of hats. Very busy most of the time. But choosing myself just case by case. I guess really just that, like doing things that brought me joy, doing things that make me, bring me happiness, connecting with friends, going out, maybe grabbing a coffee with a friend, or honestly, one of the biggest things that's got me through the vast majority of my marriage and all the things that have been going on with me was my friends in our silly, funny enough group chats and sharing videos with them. In fact, most of my friends know that I don't really care if they respond. I don't care. I'm not going to be the person anymore that's like, oh my God, you're so behind. I've sent you so many videos. You're so behind. How come you haven't watched any of them? Or, hey, did you see the videos I sent you? Nope. I'm never going to be that person. The reason being is the fact that whenever I do come across a video that reminds me of one of my friends, I send it to them because I want them to know that somebody's thinking about them. I will say that the way I treat my friends, especially my very closest of friends, the way I show up for them is how I wish that my spouse showed up for me in my marriage. Wow. I don't know if I've ever said that out loud. I don't know if I've ever said that out loud. I don't know why I feel like I need to say that one more time. It kind of gave me chills. I just got goosebumps. The way I show up I feel like I need to write that as soon as I get done with this podcast. I need to put that on my phone. Copyright it. The way I show up for my friends is the way that I would want my spouse to show up for me in my marriage. And that has yet to happen. Which is why I'm also very grateful for my really good friends. But to me, that's choosing myself. every day, even though there are people who depend upon me, even though I have responsibilities every day, choosing myself is putting one step in front of the other, trusting myself enough to know that I'm making the right decision for myself, specifically the right decision for my future self. I know that myself, like if we're thinking like 15, 20, 30 plus years from now, that version of myself is going to thank me for ultimately like making one of the toughest decisions in my life that I've had to make for myself. How do you sit with the tension of loving someone and still choosing to walk a different path? You know, I'm not even. That's not really necessarily a tough one. You can love somebody and either love them from a distance or otherwise love them and then still choose yourself in the long run. It's not that I don't love my husband. Now I'm not in love with him anymore, but I do love my husband. I'll always love my husband for many different reasons. But at the same time, I love myself more. I want to show it for me. All the years that things could have been different, it's in the past. The past is in the past. The only thing that we can focus on is the now, like what's happening today. And today, I'm choosing myself. I want joy and peace and happiness. And I don't want necessarily love or joy and peace and all those things that come with it as well. I don't want to be in a situation where it's like, okay, you can get this, but there's a catch. Or I'm going to provide or give you this, but just on my terms or for a short amount of time. No, it's infinite. It's ongoing, it's infinite. It's never going to be easy, but that's the point, right? Is always striving for a better version of yourself. Yeah. But like I said, at the end of the day, I don't really necessarily even say, I would say like there's tension there. I mean, like I said, it's not that I'm not gonna love him at any point, but I guess I already said that, like, I love myself more. I love myself more. I don't, there, I could just as easily regress and go back to the way that things were. I mean, hell, I've done it so many years now. I mean, why not, right? That, to me, yes, that is one of the scarier parts, is the unknown. But at the same time, I have been on a path of discovering myself to know to know that how bold and bright and bubbly and fun and big and just out there I want to be, and just friendly and compassionate and empathetic and just all the things. And I don't want to be in a space in my life, in a partnership, in a relationship or a marriage, that I have to otherwise kind of like condense myself down in some parts or sometimes or some places, and then otherwise everywhere else it's like, show it for yourself, go big, go bold. Like, it just kind of makes you feel a little bit loony when you can't authentically like feel free or safe to be yourself all the time. And to me, that's the ultimate freedom, is when you can get to a space one day where you can you don't have to like overthink things, right? I'll give you an example. You know, I am a different version of myself when I'm away from my house, when I'm somewhere on vacation. Even if I've times that I lately have been like 4 or 5 hours away for something for for like a day or more, I'm just there's a whole different side of me, a whole different version. I just feel so different versus when I'm in my house, there are many days where it is very tiring. It is very mentally exhausting. Um, and I think, like, I don't know if I've said this before. I know I've told my therapist this, but in my marriage, my brain feels like it's like this Rubik's Cube, right? And there's different components and there's different levels, and it just keeps going and kind of like alternating depending upon, like, okay, we're going to shift again. Like, what kind of day is he having? We're going to shift again. What was that conversation like? We're going to shift the Rubik's Cube and keep, and it's like, that's what it feels like, is when you're watching somebody that's holding the Rubik's Cube and they're twisting and turning it over and over again, finding the right patterns, right, to like match it up to, get to the end point. That's what my brain feels like. That's what my brain feels like, y'all. And I don't want that. I don't want that for myself. I don't want that for you guys. I don't want that for myself. Let's see. If this episode marks the beginning of clarity, what do the next chapters need to hold? Ooh, I think that, for sure, because this is episode 6, and I did say that one of the goals for myself is that I really wanted to close this series out by the end of the year. So I would say that for sure, one more chapter. Idealistically, I wanted to do 2 more, but in my hardest of hearts, unless anything changes, I feel like there's just 1 more episode left. I feel good about that. I mean, I feel like to say that 7 episodes, I mean, if we want to count the first one, I think the first one was more or less like an intro, but I feel like I'm getting kind of to the end point of this. And I knew that I wanted to get to a stopping point before the year ended, just as like a personal goal for myself. Not necessarily putting pressure on myself or anything, but I knew that I wanted to play around with the idea of rebranding my podcast. I'm not 100% sure if I want to keep the same name, Unscrambled Faith. It has served its purpose for this past year. So I have mixed emotions, honestly, if I want to change the name up or not. So we'll see. We'll see going into 2026. But I know that for sure there's 1 more chapter to be shared and talked about this week. So definitely stay tuned for that, because that'll be posted and coming up over the next couple of days. All right. So, last question. What do you want the listener to understand about choosing a hard path, even when it's misunderstood? To me, because I have been there a few times, whether in my 20s or now in my late 30s, I will say that when there's something that's laid out in front of you, something that's on your heart, something that's come across, mentioned to you, something that you're wanting to do, a path that you're wanting to take, or a decision that you're wanting or needing to make for yourself, when it's right, it's when there's going to be more roadblocks to get you to the other side of that decision. When not everything in like your heart and your soul is going to feel at peace and aligned, and you're going to be so sure of yourself. But just to me, like, when it's still the right decision to be had is when there are going to be like outliers, like, people, life's going to be thrown at you, things are going to get in the way, naysayers are going to start coming out, opinions are going to be thrown. And that's when, even though it's going to be one of the hardest paths for you to choose, perhaps one of the toughest decisions in your life that you're going to need to make for yourself, it's not meant to be understood. And to me, why I say that, why I believe that, is that, I mean, think about it. If you're choosing a new path for yourself, for me, it's like I'm choosing a new path for myself, a new chapter for myself. That is the unknown. It's like a book hasn't even been written, right? God's written it, but I don't know what's to come. I don't know what's ahead. And that, to me, it makes sense that that decision, that path is going to be misunderstood because you're just getting to know yourself, right? Like, that's a whole nother version of yourself. Once you take that leap of faith, once you decide to walk down that path, go down that road for yourself, turn the page, that is a version of yourself that you have yet to meet. So to me, it makes sense that anybody on the outside of that is not going to understand. You're going to be misunderstood because you have yet to meet that version of yourself, let alone everyone else around you has not gotten the opportunity to meet that person either. So it does make sense to me that the decision or the path that lies ahead that is the right decision for you to make is going to be otherwise misunderstood, because if everyone understood it, if everyone got it and was on board with it, it wouldn't be meant for you otherwise. Because God has individual plans for you and I. He has stories laid out in front of us that are already written that we have no inkling about, that because we can't foresee the future. Okay, right? Like, right? We can't foresee the future. We can only determine what's happening in the now. We only have a slight bit of control over what's going on in the now. But if you have a hard path or a decision that you're wanting to make for yourself, when it feels right, when you've prayed about it, when you've given it up to God, surrendered it from your shoulders, when you're not carrying it anymore, there's nothing that's like irks, it's like nothing constricting you like physically, internally. To me, it's like when it feels right and it's aligning like mind, body, and soul, that to me is when it's the right path to choose, when it's the right decision to make. And it's okay if others don't understand it, because the most important part is that you trust yourself enough to know that this is the right decision for you. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I mentioned earlier, as of right now, I'm planning on recording one more episode for this series, and who knows, we'll see what's next for 2026. Otherwise, share this with somebody if you feel like they may get something out of it. It helps me a lot. If you are streaming this, please do me a favor and subscribe to this podcast. Give me a thumbs up. Give me a review. Feel free to leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought about all of this. Maybe one question stood out to you more than most. Let me know if you have any questions otherwise. Maybe you know somebody that's going through a similar situation. But other than that, I hope y'all have an incredible week. Christmas is coming up. Stay tuned for the next episode. Be on the lookout for that. But in the meantime, thank you for hanging out with me and sharing your time with me. I'm your host, Megan Clark, and don't forget to unscramble your faith and find clarity in the chaos.